it's much more about developing people than I would say it happens in a corporate entity, right?
Mm.
And we want to make sure that we're building up students in ways that edify both their interests and equip them with the tools that they need to be successful out in the workplace. And so it's certainly a very different mindset. A lot of course, coaching and mentoring goes on in a corporate environment,
Mhm.
but you don't always wrap those things around the rest of what you do, right? Like,
Right.
What you're doing for the body.
Mark Thompson.
He told him.
Mark Thompson.
I will start by saying this.
Welcome to another podcast, the Let's Dream Big podcast, brought to you by CTA. I am your host, Mark Thompson, your interview expert, back with another banger again. So today I have one of my good friends, fellows, buddies, tennis partners. I mean, we go way back. I think we met through a mutual friend from way long time ago, but still, it's always good to have good resources, good networking, good people in your life. Today, I want to introduce you Mr. Kanton Reynolds, Director of Undergraduate Program and Associate Teaching Professor at NC State University at Industrial Engineering. Did I say that right? I think I said it right.
you good to go.
But this is a man that is a leader in the community. He is someone I've followed over the years and watched him transition from career to career. I think were you at IBM at one point?
Yeah. That was
I
probably the
remember
longest
that. I think
dream I
I
had in
met you at
industry.
Lanny's house a long time ago. But yes, great man of a long history of resume. I wanted you guys to introduce. I wanted to introduce you to him so that way you can understand the great people that I know from networking, being around this community, being in the North Carolina region, and expose him to the world. So say what's up, Mr. Kanton. I'm sorry for that terrible introduction, but it was it was all over the place.
Nah, it's great. No, thank you, Mark, for having me. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share some nuggets of wisdom from my journey with the folks. And I actually think I don't know if we met at a friend's. We met playing flag football, one of the two. But either
One of
way,
the two.
happy to be here and happy to share in this moment with you.
Man, this is awesome, man. It's always a good time to have good people here again. And I thought about you. I was like, who better to not have on my show than Kanton? Kanton has been through the fire. He's been through different storms. You've been through incredible journeys in your life. And that's what we got to showcase today. So let's start right now. Tell the people about Kanton Reynolds. Who is Mr. Reynolds?
Grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. My parents are both high school teachers. And found my way to NC State, wanting to be an engineer. The major engineering school in South Carolina is Clemson, and wasn't a good fit for me personally. And actually, my next door neighbor, growing up, played D-line for NC State, so he really introduced me to NC State and what the school was all about. Came up here for a visit, fell in love with it, and came here for undergrad, and kind of been hanging around here in North Carolina by and large ever since. So it's been a fantastic journey for me, and I'm happy to share that with you and your folks.
Man, that's good. Man, I always wanted to go to NC State myself, but hey, God had a different plan. So I am a spider. Anybody afraid of spiders, be afraid of me. But that's awesome, man. You said both of your parents were teachers?
Yeah, both my parents are high school teachers, and worked in the Richland County School District, #1 in Columbia. And my dad, social studies and history, and my mom, family consumer science. My dad went to Claflin and for undergrad and graduate school at North Carolina A&T. My mom went to South Carolina State. So kind of rich historical Black college background.
Two Aggies.
Yeah.
Bulldogs, right?
Yeah. South Carolina State Bulldogs. But yeah, rich kind of HBCU legacy. And so wanted to take it in a different direction for undergrad, but I did eventually go back to A&T for grad school twice, once for my master's degree and once for my PhD. So really diverse experiences educationally for me, and happy to share that as well.
You couldn't bring a bad grade home at all as a kid, right?
Yeah, no, people talk about that, being a teacher's kid, and there's definitely some pluses and minuses. The pluses, being, you always had kind of access to your parents when you needed them, and that certainly helped out in some situations. And also, other teachers were definitely more likely to help you because they're
Mhm.
helping one of their colleagues in the process. I definitely struggled with math in high school, and my high school math teacher was just kind enough to spend extra time with me at lunch or after school because my dad was a teacher. That was one of her colleagues, right? So that's the way she kind of framed
Mhm.
it. And my younger sister, same thing. We went to the same high school, and I'm sure she benefited from that as well.
Man, that's great, man. That's great. I always get help. I used to get in trouble in school a lot. And somebody always knew my parents, and they would
Mhm.
always get me in trouble, but they also helped me be better, So I appreciate that story because I was fortunate enough to know somebody at the school that knew my parents. And I say fortunate now. When I was younger, I hated it. It was like, oh my God,
Mhm,
I can't
mhm.
do nothing wrong in school. Everybody watching me, somebody's over my shoulder. But that's a good thing as you get older and understand that. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So
And it gives you access to stuff that you may not have, or opportunities that maybe you hadn't or wouldn't have been considered for, right?
right.
Because more people know you, right? So to your point, you kind of probably hated it in high school as I did, but then when you think
Mhm.
about it, you think about the opportunities you had, you probably would have had some of those if not for the fact that somebody knew who your parents were.
Right, right. Who would you say that, between your parents that you would be most likely to be like, your dad or your
Mhm.
mom?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think I'm probably more like my dad, just because I do have a minor in history. He was the one that encouraged me to pursue that and have an interest in it. And so that's probably where I get a lot of my, kind of thought processes around, framing historical, actions or activities into my classroom, bringing that into my
Mhm.
classroom, even if it's not a history class, thinking about it in that perspective and going back and trying to read and learn, right? Those folks that don't understand the history are doomed to repeat it,
Mhm.
right? So
Right.
that's probably where I take a lot of my paradigms and kind of thought processes around teaching. I probably take those more from my dad than I do from my mom.
That's good. That's good. Fathers are good. Mothers are great. Let's not get that twisted, but fathers are essential. Nah, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I take a lot of wisdom from my dad. He didn't think he taught me anything, but I told him he taught me a lot. Um, but that's good. One of the questions I want to go ahead and just jump into, um, your world is now into this, you've gone from corporate space, you're going into the university space. It's still corporate, those dynamics still hit the same avenues. How is it, being from a corporate space and then going into a university and being corporate, but also being more of an educator? How does that work?
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation with somebody a little bit earlier today. It's a complete mindset
Mhm.
shift. Sorry. When you work in corporate America, you're responsible to shareholders. You're more
Mhm.
focused on the dollars and the numbers. Whereas here on campus, we're building relationships. We're building up young men and young women. To kind of see what their destiny is when they go out into the workforce, and it requires a different ethic of care and a different mindset. And so it's much more about developing people than I would say it happens in a corporate entity,
Mhm.
right? And we want to make sure that we're building up students in ways that edify both their interests and equip them with the tools that they need to be successful out in the workplace. And so it's certainly a very different mindset. A lot of course, coaching and mentoring goes on in a corporate environment,
Mhm.
but you don't always wrap those things around the rest of what you do, right? Like,
Right.
being involved in, the co-curricular aspects of students' lives. For example, last week, I was in Atlanta with a group of 48 NC State students supporting our chapter of National Society of Black Engineers, right?
Mhm.
And so we're at a conference and I'm out on the career fair floor, you know, um, helping make introductions to students from people that I may know that work at an IBM or Lenovo or Toshiba or these companies I still have a lot of contacts with, or I'm, helping them debrief after an interview or helping them prepare for an interview, right? Like, so you're much more intricately involved in, the co-curricular aspects of your students' lives, than you are in corporate America. In addition to, traveling domestic, I travel internationally with students, right? And so
Mm,
help them navigate a different culture in a different country, and even some places where neither one of us speak the language. Those are very important moments in students' lives, especially when you start talking about students that never left, North Carolina, never left,
right.
this region of the country to go to another country and have an educational opportunity, and have it facilitated by faculty members, impactful moment in their lives. And so having the opportunity to share in that and build them up in that way and prepare them for what's out there in the world has certainly been
Mhm.
edifying for me.
Well, I'm gonna ask you two questions here. So, and I guess let me flip them first. Did you bring anything from the corporate space to the university space that helped you kind of give you an advantage, maybe to help foster those relationships? Because we know corporate has a structure at every company on how
Yeah.
to do that, right? But you get to bring it in a full set of really mastering and building a relationship. And the second question is that how do they measure you when you're building relations? How do they measure you performance wise
Mhm.
at a university
Mhm.
compared to how it's done at a corporate place?
Yeah. So to answer the first question, what did I bring with me? I think I brought with me my experiences and my Rolodex, right? For lack of a better
Mhm.
term, I don't have those anymore. I brought my experiences, right? So when I'm teaching, I always try to insert examples from my experience in industry, right? Having spent 20 years working at General Motors or IBM or Lenovo, I try to insert those experiences into my classes so that it has real
Mhm.
world meaning and impact for our students. So that's the first thing I bring. The second thing I bring is, a network of connections. As I said, we just came back from a career fair and you stop by the IBM booth. I know somebody who works there. You stop by the
Right.
Toshiba booth. I know somebody who works there, right? You stop by the Lenovo booth. I know somebody that works there, right? So, just those networks and connections, um, and being able to prepare students because I know what folks are looking for in industry, either because I've done it myself or I still have those
Mhm.
network connections. I talk to those people regularly and they say, hey, this is what we think is hot right now. And so that's what I think I bring to the table from a tangible standpoint, that helps our students. And then just trying to make the courses as realistic as possible, right? So I think about our
Mhm.
capital course in senior design at NC State, where in industrial engineering, where we're working with local companies and you're functioning essentially as an internal consultant to this company, right? So I try to bring some of the rigor in terms of project management, milestones,
Mm.
those type of things, and program reviews and reporting that are expected in a corporate, and bring those to our students so they know what to prepare for when they go out, or how to prepare for those things when they go out into the
Right.
workforce. The second part of your question, in terms of how you're evaluated, it's I think the evaluation process in academia is it, it's it's much different than what happens in corporate America. Typically, what happens in corporate
Mhm.
America is, some executive gets some set of objectives, and then they kind of translate those
Right.
down to what that means for you, and then you talk about how you're going to contribute to those objectives. Um, I have a hybrid role, so it's part faculty, part staff. On the faculty
Mhm.
side, we have teaching evaluations that students are able to give feedback on the performance of the faculty member. Those are taken into consideration, but
Wow.
students are not necessarily the most sophisticated consumers of education,
Right.
right? So what happens is, you have a faculty member that is senior to you. So in my instance, someone who is a full professor in the field would come and observe my class, look at my materials, understand, what teaching methodologies I'm using, and then sit down with me and give a performance appraisal based on their experience.
Mm.
Um, and then in addition to that, we talk about, the accreditation bodies that we have. So in engineering, we have ABET, which is the Accreditation Board for Engineering Technology. But across the university, we have also SAC-COC, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Commission on Colleges. So how are we meeting the student learning outcomes for this class based on the methodologies that are in place from either ABAT, which is 1 through 7. They have 7 paradigms that they use to describe how engineering should take place in the educational setting, or it's some of the SAC-COC criteria that talk about general education. So it depends on what class you're teaching and which accreditation body it falls under. All of those things factor into your evaluation on the faculty side. And then on the staff side, it's really, what percentage of your time are you going to devote to which activities, right? So a certain percentage of my time is devoted to advising, a certain percentage of my time is devoted to service. So like last week when I was at the National Society of Black Engineers Conference, that falls into service, right? So I'm serving our students by being present with them in a space where they are, looking for jobs, or our chapters here on campus was also competing for Chapter of the Year, which they did win, by the way, and was announced on our flight back from Atlanta.
Oh,
Which is pretty
wow.
cool. Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. We ended up on the same
I
flight
think I
back.
saw that on LinkedIn.
Yeah, our chancellor was actually on the same flight. Now, Chancellor Woodson was on the same flight back with us. It was coincidence he was not with us at the NSB conference. But he was, Atlanta's a major hub. He was transiting through Atlanta. We ended up back on the same flight. And so
Wow.
he took pictures with the students and their awards. And then Delta made the announcement on the flight when we were, landing in Raleigh-Durham, home of the, 2024 NSB National Chapter of the Year, Region 2 Chapter of the Year. And so that was pretty cool.
Felt good.
So yeah, so those are the ways that you're kind of allocated, 20% for service, 20% for advising, 40% towards curriculum development or recruitment or engagement, whatever those milestones may be. And then you set kind of goals under those milestones. And it's much more of a discussion-based process in academia, right? So in corporate America, you are typically talking to your immediate supervisor, and that person is kind of passing judgment on your performance. In academia. It is the faculty that are senior to you. So they sit together in a committee, and then that is passed along to the department head, and then department head kind of delivers the performance appraisal assessment. And I find it to be much more of a democratic system, right? So we've all been in situations where we're working with someone that we don't necessarily get along with, and that can negatively, it's hard to do that in academia because it really is more of a democratic process. So we have I don't remember right off that, but we have 10 or 12 tenured faculty. Those are the folks that kind of sit in judgment of me. So if I make one of them mad, that's less than 10% of the vote. You don't have that much of one. Now you try to convince the other folks, but there's still 11, it's 9, 10, 11 other people out there that So that's typically how it works now.
No, man, I appreciate the explanation. I mean, it helped me. I'm pretty sure the audience was like, wow, that was a lot. But at the same time, you broke down some things that I'm like, wow, we think it's hard in corporate, but at that level, I think you have a lot more to really balance. But it does create what I say is some personal accountability for you to take action within your own career in a university space. Me personally, I like interacting with people. I like talking and getting things in motion where I'm not just checking the box. Sometimes in corporate, you do check boxes, a lot of boxes. And if you check the boxes, you still won't get a good rating. But when you check the boxes in this space, it seems like you're checking boxes. You're also taking action on your own. You're learning. You're continuing to develop. There's a lot of pieces here that showcase how you as a professor, as a director, can mold and build and continue to be on different levels and cycles of your life and progression at a university just by doing what helps them be better, So that's good. That helped me understand a lot because I'm always looking at the motion and the operations of things work. That's why I'm a director of HR operations. I pay attention to everything and I ask those type of questions. So, but let's get into it. Today's topic was about career mindset in action, and definitely wanted to pick your brain on career mindset. So, what are the things that you do on a daily basis that give you that focus, that gives you, what do you do to challenge yourself to be better as well? So I think those are probably two questions, but at the same time, how do you focus, and then how do you keep yourself accountable to be better?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna answer those questions in reverse order. How do I keep myself accountable to be better? So one of the things that I try to do is to make sure that I am constantly aware of what's going on as it relates to the types of classes that I teach, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I try to think about is how can I create opportunities for me or for someone else to understand from a perspective what's going on in the world and how it relates to what we're trying to accomplish here in the classroom, right? So when I think about that, I think about, okay, how can I take what's going on in the world today and push that into my classes because it
Mhm.
gives students more relevant examples of how to think about things. So I'll give you an example. So last night in my engineering leadership class, we are talking about how leaders don't always pivot, right? Until
Right.
they're forced to do so. Right. And so the negative example we gave was BlackBerry. Right. So I'm a little bit older than you. I don't know if you remember, when BlackBerry,
You ain't
everybody
that
wanted a
old. You ain't that much older.
BlackBerry. Everybody wanted a BlackBerry, right? And because it had the physical keyboard, right? And
Yeah.
I remember being in grad school, I wrote a paper on a BlackBerry at the time, right? Like,
Really? Wow.
yeah, I wrote an entire paper on a BlackBerry. And so BlackBerry was the phone. Everybody wanted to have one. You think back to when Barack Obama was president, he had a
Mhm.
BlackBerry. Right? He was the first president to
Mhm.
really have full access to a cell phone, and everybody wanted it because of the keyboard and because of the security features. And but they never pivoted in asking when people
Right.
have a BlackBerry now, right? So that's the example I use in class, right? Because there's plenty of case study and research that's been done on why they failed. There's even a documentary out, right, on the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
But in order to
Yeah.
fuse into a classroom where students may not be, so this particular class that I teach, there's probably maybe one or two students that are old enough to really remember what BlackBerry was like back then.
They might
And
know
so we,
Blockbuster. Same thing.
yeah, exactly, right. So that's the next example that was brought up was Blockbuster,
Mhm.
right? So Netflix
Mhm.
tried to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million, right? Blockbuster thought it was too expensive. They didn't want to invest in
Right.
it, right? But that wasn't the smartest move because where's Blockbuster
Right.
today? Gone. And
Trash.
where's Netflix,
Trash.
right? Yeah, one of the most popular entertainment companies, globally, right? And so,
Right.
you think about that example. The other example that we thought about was, Blockbuster's business model wasn't feasible because of the infrastructure behind it, right? And
Right.
so, I think back to when Amazon first came out, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like, I would never invest in Amazon because all they sell is books. Now, yeah, I read books, but do I read enough books to invest in a company that only sells books and sells them online and has to deliver them to me? When I want my book then. I'll just go to Barnes and Noble, right?
Right.
So I was short-sighted. But when they expanded, I also didn't think that they could withstand the shipping costs of shipping all that stuff to you, right? But Jeff Bezos was smart enough to figure out if he had his own distribution system, he can ship anything he wants, right?
Mhm.
And so that's the part that makes him, a multi billionaire.
Right.
And makes the rest of us still working every day because he had a vision that nobody else had. But I have to use those examples to translate it to my students, but it's the principles the same behind what happened with BlackBerry, right? BlackBerry didn't
Right.
transition to a open source model where people can add apps to their phone. They wanted to keep
Mhm.
everything proprietary, and they lost out because of that. Whereas Amazon
Right.
allows anybody to sell anything on their website now, basically, right? They've
Right.
even gone out on eBay, but their expertise is bringing you things that you may not necessarily be able to get close to you in your market at a price that's reasonable with a turnaround time that is tremendous, right?
Yeah.
And so that business model resonates with people, right? The other example we talk about is people don't pivot into based on the fact that they're entrenched in some regions. So I was going back to what I mentioned earlier about the conference. So I was at the conference and I'm walking around convention floor. I was actually talking to one of my students at the time,
Mhm.
and a young lady comes up to me. She's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And it was a really kind of, and so it was kind of, I was taken aback because I'm talking to a student and a student would never talk to me like that, right? And
Right.
so I was like, this can't be one of my students, right? Like, who's talking to me this way? And again, I knew people at other companies, but it just, the way it was like too familiar, right? And
Mhm.
so I was like, who is this? Maybe it's somebody from a company that I know that I'm really cool with, and that's okay, right?
Right.
But I turned around and it actually ended up being one of my cousins.
Ah,
No idea. She's a second cousin, right? And we didn't necessarily grow up together, but I recognized her immediately once I turned around, right? But I didn't recognize her voice. It wasn't familiar to me
right.
because we don't talk like that, right? The point being that, once we started chatting, right? I'm like, okay, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? She works for I think it's Kenvue. That's the company
Mhm.
that Johnson and Johnson spun off, right? So
Right.
Johnson and Johnson was this big conglomerate, and they spun off all of their consumer packaged goods, right? So the lotions like Aveeno, the shampoos, the
Mm,
mouthwash like Listerine, that's in a different company now because they want to focus strictly on drugs. Well, part of that
mm,
was what they needed to innovate, and they were in a space where no one was forcing them to innovate because we got all this money coming in from all the lotion. Y'all buying all the lotion,
right.
you buying all of this. So we're not forced to innovate. So those are the types of things that I try to do to keep myself current and infuse them into a classroom where students may not have any idea what BlackBerry is.
Right. Man, vision and pivot. I wrote that down. I think Jeff Bezos makes about 7 million every 18 minutes,
There you
something
go.
like that. Don't quote me on it, but it's
It's way
man,
more than me
started
and
in the
you,
commercial.
buddy.
Right, right. Man, that's a good. I like that. I like those examples, man. I mean, I use Blockbuster all the time. I use the thoughts of the podcast is called Let's Dream Big for a reason,
Hmm.
because we want people to understand that you have a vision and you also have dreams, and those things and how to attack them come with intentionality. You have
Hmm.
to be understanding who you are, understanding your purpose, and driving towards them.
Yeah.
And we talk about career mindset, and we talk about the intentionality behind that, because you have to be driven for something that you want to achieve to get there.
Hmm.
And how to get there comes with principles. You take
Yep.
those principles and apply them every day. So in your space, you're applying these things, you're helping your students get better, you're getting better in these spaces. And I think, as we talked about this, one of the things you do a lot, which I've seen, like I said, you post something almost every other week or every other month because you're traveling. Let's talk about, your career mindset in networking. Networking is a huge piece in order for growth to happen, but also for you to get to other places you may not have gotten to. But what has it done for you? And what would you say, how your mindset should be in the networking space?
Yeah. I wish there was a master stroke for people to just be able to be good at networking, right? So I do tell my students your network is your network, right?
Yep.
So being able to connect with people in a authentic way and build those relationships so that when you reach out to someone, they're willing to help you it is a skill, right?
Right.
It is a talent. Um, and so, there's some research out there that says, the people that would be most helpful to you are not the people closest to you, but the people 1 or 2 degrees removed from them. So in other words, you and I are friends, and you may not be
Right.
the most helpful to me, but somebody is going to be helpful to me, or somebody I know is
Exactly.
going to be helpful to you. That's the principle, right? And so I
Yep.
think about those things, and I think about one of the first things is, people are always watching, even when you're not looking, or
Hmm.
when you don't think they're looking. And so how you carry yourself and how you represent yourself is important.
Right.
And you want to have a positive reputation, because people will ask about you all the time and you have no idea what's going on, right? Happened to
Right.
me at conference this weekend, right? And that's why the other things you'd be very careful about the things you say and who you say them to, right?
Right.
I was at the conference this past weekend, and I talked to a professor from a major university in the Midwest, and he was kind of asking me, how I liked it here at NC State, and I had all good things to say about NC State, in my experience here, and those things are all true, right?
Right.
But it turns out, a few more minutes into the conversation, he was like, "Oh, by the way, I know such and such a so and so who works in your department, right?"
Mm.
Right, and the person that he knew is one of those people that evaluates me, right? And
Right.
so, that could have been, if I was over there talking trash about NC State
Yeah.
or my experience here, that could have been a really awkward moment, right?
Right.
And so that's why you got to be careful with who you share information with, how you share it, and what you're saying. But more importantly, because I have positive things to say, and I had actually mentioned, this particular professor, someone that I kind of looked up to or admired, based on what I've seen them do here. What do you think that person is going to do? they're going to go
Go
back and
back.
tell that person, oh, I met Kanton at the conference and, he had really nice things to say about you. Right.
Right.
And so, I have a good relationship with this faculty member, but I'm probably going to have an even better one because now that person knows that I've been talking about them in a good way behind their back. Right.
Exactly.
And so, thinking about how you connect with people and making sure that the connections you make are authentic. Right. So I am
Mhm.
naturally, and people don't believe this, but I'm naturally an introvert. I can
Yeah.
go in a room and just kind of mind my own business and just, do
This
whatever.
also says you're smart too. You're a smart guy.
Yeah, I don't try to meet everybody in the room, right? Like, to keep myself from being too much an introvert, I try to set a goal. I say, I want to meet one new person in this room, right?
Mm,
It doesn't have to be somebody that I exchange business cards with, or it could be, right? Like I got this stack of
right.
business cards from this conference in Atlanta with people that I feel like I made genuine connections with, right? So there's 1, 2,
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So I was there 4 days and I got 7 cards. So I did okay. But the point being is that you don't want to just, people are not attracted to people that are serial networks, right? Like they just want to fill up their
Mhm.
LinkedIn. When I see somebody has, 3, 4,000 people on LinkedIn and their job is not to be like a corporate recruiter or something like that, right? That makes sense for
Right.
somebody whose
Right.
job is. But if you're just a rank and file employee or you move your way and you have 3, that's not somebody that I really want on my LinkedIn page, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
that's not somebody that's interested in making genuine connections with people, right? You go to my
Right.
LinkedIn page, I may have a couple of hundred people, which, for somebody that has my level of experience, that's probably about right. It's
Right.
certainly accelerated a lot more because I have a bunch of students on there now, former students,
Mhm.
because I've been in education now for a decade. But you cut off that, you're probably down to about maybe 500 people, right? Like I don't endeavor to keep a lot of broad
Yeah.
connections. I endeavor to have really meaningful relationships with a select group of people, and hopefully that gets me the network of connections that I need to go where I want to go.
Man, that's good for from the introverts. I'm an ambivert. I'm both. I get a
Mhm.
like I need people, but I don't need people. I have to
Yeah.
charge my batteries in order to be around people. And on the side of social media, I do a purge. I haven't been on social media in 3 years. I got back on because of this business. And when I got back on, I'm like, now I'm adding strangers and I'm adding people that I'm trying to connect with into the business and teach them about what they can be as far as getting their career. And when I do that, I was like, man, I'm connecting with these folks, but I also have my friends on there. But if my friends there hadn't add value, I have a cutoff. Like you got 6 months to say something to me. If you don't, I'm chopping you off. When I was on social media, I used to do that. I used to purge because it was like, why I don't have 3,000 friends. You know, if if I die tomorrow, it's not going to be 3,000 people at my funeral. You know,
Amen.
there will be some solid folks that have been in my life over the past few years of my life, but 3,000, these people are just here to say hi, bye, and not adding value. That's a great point when you think about networking. You do want to network with the people who are really going to invest into who you are. Um, and just clicking the button and adding people is not the way to do it. So,
Right.
where would you say you've gotten the most value? Is it in that in person, or have you actually like I found two ways of doing it, of creating that vehicle through maybe LinkedIn. But I do see the value in person and doing it too. Which one do you? I wouldn't say there's no value to it, but I think there's purposes or topics we can talk about on both, where it is valuable to have those discussions and it's valuable to have them in person. So really, no question. I solved it already. So we teach that in my course to the same thing you said, represent yourself, carry yourself well. And one thing that you did point out that I think is really golden is to kind of create a goal within networking. I'm gonna meet one person. That's a goal, especially if you don't like talking to people. There's a lot of people who just can't stand it. They don't know how to do it, or they're scared or worried about what somebody may be thinking about them. But one of the things I did when I started looking for careers, and I actually do it today. My goal is to meet 3 people every day on LinkedIn. And if I go into a meeting or a session or go to some conferences, I want to meet 5 or more people, as many as I can. And some companies actually have virtual sessions where you can do these webinars and attendees. And in there, I've noticed the trend is what people will do is they'll see your name and they'll go on LinkedIn, link you in and say, hey, saw you at such and such, just linking in. Thank you for the connection. Boom. I'm like, wow, I done got some new folks on here. Let me learn about them. Let me study them and figure it out. But I think that was important what you said there about getting a goal when you go network. And that'll kind of help you like, all right, it's a checkbox at first, but once you get used to it, you break that comfort zone. It's
Yeah, I
good.
think that, I know for me, right, like that may work for you and for your business model, what you're trying to accomplish, and that's fantastic. For
Mhm.
me, I am less interested in connecting with people like that. I would much rather build deeper relationships. And even here at school, right? So students
Mhm.
need recommendations for things all the time. And I
Yeah.
tell them, don't even think about asking me for a recommendation if we haven't had 2 to 3 touch points, right? So you can't just
Mhm.
say, oh, I was in your class in spring 2023.
Right.
And right,
Right.
like that means
You have
nothing.
no value to get like.
Yeah, right. Like that doesn't mean anything to me, right? Like, tell me that, well, I will make an exception for that, right? Like if you did study abroad with me, to me, that's a little bit different because we've spent, a month in another country, right?
Right.
But if you say, hey, I was on study abroad with you, or I went to the NSB conference with you, or I went to, ISC conference with you, or in the IC ambassador program and IC ambassadors, and you interviewed me for that, and I was in this class, right? Like you got to have 2 different touch points, right, in order for me to say I'm
Mhm.
willing to write your recommendation. Don't even think about asking, right? Because I want my recommendations to mean something. I want people to realize that if I'm writing you a recommendation, I'm really am putting my name and my reputation behind you, right?
Mhm.
Both on campus and on, right? And so if that's the case, I want it to mean something. And to me, in order for it to mean something, we need to have some type of relationship. And so, I
Right.
want to see you in more than one space, right? Anybody, you can be anybody for, a weekend at the NSB conference or one of my,
Mhm.
50 students in my class, but let's build a relationship. But I also make myself available to my students, right? Like, I'll tell students, having been an NC State alum, right? Like I have season tickets to, both men's basketball and football. Faculty
I didn't
staff
get
get
not
free
one
tickets.
invite.
I have one season ticket.
Yeah.
And faculty staff get free tickets to women's basketball games. So I go to all of
Right.
those games, right? And I tell students, for the places I have assigned seats, like football and basketball, hey, I sit in section, 120 in
Mhm.
PNC Arena, right? So catch me at halftime. And some of them do, right? I
Right.
sit
Right.
in section 22 in Carter Finley Stadium, right? Come
Mhm.
by and catch me. Let's chop it up about the game, right? And so those are opportunities to, build relationships with students. And I also go out of my way to support our students, right? So
Right.
if our students are in some type of competition, one of the big things on campus here is Back to School Jam. So Back to School Jam is like a variety show that the African American students have on campus. Beginning every school year. So it's part gospel choir, part step show,
Mm.
part dance competitions, a little bit of everything. I go to support my students, right? And I sit in the
Right.
audience and I cheer them on. Or if our students are pledging Greek letter organizations, even if it's not my organization, I will go out there and support
You're
them.
you're Alpha, correct?
Correct, correct.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
sir.
yeah. As is my dad, actually. My dad is as well. Yeah. So
Wow.
my dad is a 72-year member of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but I tell students, like I'm here to support you in whatever it is going to, help you feel like, you make a difference. You come on this campus and you can ask the members of Omega Psi Phi, you can ask the members of Kappa Alpha Psi, you can ask the members of
Mm.
Phi Beta Sigma. They will all tell you, right? Like Dr. Reynolds has had my back, right? I
Mm.
don't, I'm 51 years old. I don't let little small stuff like that. I don't respect those small things. I
Man, you
want you
ain't
to do
51, man. You ain't 51.
I want you to do what's in your best interest and tell me how I can support you in doing that, right? And so
Yeah.
I think if you talk to our students, they will tell you that by and large, I'm there for them, and I do what I can to help them feel like they're supported.
Man, that's great, man. You're a role model, you're a scholar, you're giving back. I mean, it feels good. I mean, I always feel like anything giving back. I don't care who you are. When you touch somebody's life, make their life and their journey better than what it was yesterday. That
Amen.
feels good. It feels good. You're in that space every day too,
Yeah.
Um, It's one of the reasons why I kind of started doing this business now and really trying to give back and showing people the way. And, we've talked about it. Like the next question I was going to ask you, you actually went through it. We're talking about building and maintaining professional relationships at any age. You went through that, and
Well, I
one
think
of
it
the
gets
things,
tougher, Marcus, as you get older, it gets harder
oh
because
yeah,
you're less likely to use some of these other things you know that people use, right? Like I don't, to your point, I'm not on social media other than LinkedIn, by
hmm
right? I don't use some of these other Twitter, Instagram. I don't use those things, and so um, you know, I have to shoot somebody a text, right? Or I have to
right,
shoot them an email in order to catch up with them, or I may send them a message on LinkedIn. But it becomes much harder to maintain those relationships. But I also think when you have meaningful relationships with people, you don't have to do this constant checking in because people know that
hmm
you have an authentic relationship. And so when you do reach out, people still answer in a meaningful way because they know you ain't trying to do this with 3,000 other people.
right, right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I'm throwing out a tip out there for the audience. Recommendations on LinkedIn are good. Recruiters do look at that information
Mm.
from the back end, especially senior recruiters. If you want to move up the move up the ladder. Getting those recommendations on LinkedIn from people that you did have those connections with. I made sure that there were people I actually worked with. So when they gave information, they were giving tangible, valuable details about our work relationship and in how I am perceived as a person for any company. And I got 13 of them. That's one of the things I strategize around, but I also was really important. It was really important for me to go out there and talk to people and say, hey, we worked for a long time. You're an SVP now. You're an EVP now. I mean, I got directors. I got everybody as far as feeding the information about my work ethic. And that was important, which means I actually built a history throughout my life of networking to continue to have folks speak on my behalf.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing, almost like having a mentor, also having a sponsor speak for you as well. I think it's an incredible way, a credible tip. Just want to throw that out there for people to utilize. So it doesn't work for everybody, but in my space, definitely does work. Yeah. Let me ask you one quick. You're in a fraternity. Did being in a fraternity help you in any way when it comes to networking, or how did it help
No, absolutely.
you?
I can give you two instances off the top of my head, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I think back to I was working at IBM, and in 99, 2000, I was told I was going to be laid off. The
Mm.
product set that I was working on, they were no longer interested in building, and so they were letting all of us go that were working on that product set. And so I was 26 maybe, and I had only been there like 2 or 3 years. And
Mhm.
so I figured I'll find another job, no worries. So in all honesty, I didn't even take it that seriously. I was like, yeah, I'll find another job. And I
Right.
was kind of just hanging out, having a good time. And then about maybe 10 days left, because they usually give you about 30 days. About 10 days
Right.
left. I was like, I probably want to at least try to
Right. Right.
find a
Right.
job.
Right.
And so people have to keep in mind this is before we didn't have dial up, but the internet at the house was pretty slow, right? So I went to work one day um and used my desktop computer, right? We didn't all have laptops back then either. And
Right.
was gonna go look for a job on the internal network at IBM. And I was walking in right at lunchtime, and there was a brother, Bobby Staten. He pledged alpha at Florida State.
Mhm.
He was walking out, I was walking in. I did not know Bobby that well. But there were probably maybe 20, 25 alphas that were working at IBM or RTP at the time, and we used to
Mhm.
get together regularly for lunch. And he used to always come to lunch. And coincidentally, the last time we had lunch, I ended up seated next to him. And
Mhm.
we talked, but I didn't consider him a friend at that point, right?
Right.
He was somebody that we were in the same fraternity, we knew each other, but he wasn't a friend. And so I was walking in, he was walking out, and he said, hey, young fella, how you doing? And I said, oh, I'm okay. And he's like, well, what's wrong? And I told him, I said, hey, I've been laid off and I got to find another job.
Mm.
He said, well, when did that happen? I said, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. And he's like, well, how come you just telling me about it? And I was like, well,
Oh wow.
I didn't really know you like that, right? And he was like, well, send me your resume and I'll see what I can do to help you.
Mm.
Right. I said, okay. So people say that all the time.
Right.
Right. And but I sent it to him. Right. I sent him the resume and I said, I appreciate anything you can do. Thanks. Right. Something real brief. So a day or two goes by. I don't hear anything. I didn't expect to hear anything. Probably end of day 2, beginning of day 3. He calls me and I didn't recognize the number. I didn't have his number. Right. He got it off my resume. And he says, hey, this is Bobby. And at first I'm like, Bobby who? And then I'm like, oh, that's the guy. And then he's like, I talked to my manager and he's going to reach out to you because he thinks that, might be an opportunity in our department for you. I was like, okay, cool. So sure enough, the next day, his manager reaches out to me, older white gentleman, Harold Wanku. And Harold reaches out to me and he's like, hey, you have time to meet tomorrow to discuss this job. And I'm like, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Here. I said, tell me what time to be there. He said, he gave me a time. I said, okay, no problem. So I showed up, suit and tie. I had my little portfolio. I had my resume printed out, right? I had some practice interview questions I had looked up, blah, blah, blah. I'm ready to go. So I walk into his queue. We shake hands. We sit down. He just starts talking, right? He don't ask me nothing about myself. He ain't looking at my resume. He just starts talking, right? He talks nonstop for about 15, 20 minutes, right? Telling me all this stuff, right? And I'm kind of taking notes. And then at the end, he stands up and he's like, well, let me know what you think. I was like, huh? He said, well, let me know what you think about the job. He said, you either want it or you don't, right? Like, so let me know what you think.
Wow.
Right? And let me know like by Friday or whatever, right? And I'm like, well, aren't you going to interview me, ask me some questions, something? And he was like, I don't need to. He said, Bobby has spoken on your behalf. I've known Bobby for 20 years. So if Bobby says you're good, then you're good. I don't need to know anything else.
Wow.
You either want the job or you don't. Right? Looks like I want the job, right? But again, I did not know him like that. I had one conversation with him at lunch, maybe a month before, right? But he saw me when I wasn't looking for someone to be seeing what I was doing. And he saw the potential in me. And that's how I got that job and extended my career at IBM for another 15 years after that, based on the fact that he co-signed on me to someone that he had a relationship. That wasn't just his manager. They were friends. I didn't know any of them, right? They had worked together IBM used to have a site in Boca Raton, Florida, and they moved all those people up to RTP probably about 4 or 5 years before. They had moved up from Florida together. So they had a long-standing relationship, even though they were a Boston employee. And they had known each other for 20 years. He just took his word on it. Right? So that's the first instance. The second instance, I'm sad to say, has to do with St. Augustine's University here in Raleigh, which we all know is undergoing some difficult times.
Right.
But when I left corporate America, I didn't really have a plan. I just, knew I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I had been sitting out for about 6 months trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, right? So I left Lenovo voluntarily. I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And they were trying to downsize a little bit from having acquired IBM's server business. And so it was just a really good time for me to leave. And so I sat out about 6 months and I was like, I need a job. Right. And, I'm pretty good with managing my money. It wasn't really about the money. It's like, I've been doing nothing for 6 months. I need to be doing something, right? Something constructive in my life. And so I had gone to a conference. I had always been interested in international education. I traveled abroad a bunch of times in grad school. I'd always been interested in international education. I was like, let me see what this is about. So I'd gone to the NAFSA conference, which is the largest conference for international studies folks, right? And I'd gone to that conference and it was in Boston. I was couch surfing with a friend and, trying to piece it all together. And I got a phone call from Dr. Everett Ward, who at the time was president at St. Augustine's. And he's also the 35th general president of Alpha Phi Alpha. So got a call from him and he said, hey, can you come by St. Augustine's and talk to me today or tomorrow? And I was like, no. He was like, why not? And I was like, because I'm in Boston.
Right.
And he's like, what are you doing in Boston? I'm like, I'm at this conference trying to, network and figure out whether or not I want to try to get a job in international programs or global studies or something like that. As I said, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm at this conference. It's a really good conference. I want to,
Right.
want to explore this thing next. Right. And he said, well, that's why I'm calling you. He said, we got a vacancy. We need someone to do international programs at St. Augustine's.
Mm.
And I know you have the background to do it. So he's like, when you get home from Boston, come over and see me and let's talk about it. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. So the next week I went over there and it was the same type of deal, right? But I knew him well, right? Because we had been in a
Right,
chapter.
right.
I knew him well. And he was like, I can't pay you a whole lot of money, right? I'm going to ask you to work a whole lot of hours. And I'm going to ask you to do a whole lot of things. But you're going to have a chance to really impact the lives of some young people here on this campus. And I'm hoping that's going to be enough, right? And so it wasn't a whole lot of money. It was a whole lot of work.
It's more than they're getting paid now.
Yeah, you're right. Right. At least I was doing something. Right. But it was very rewarding and I enjoyed every minute of it. And so I worked there for 2 years. But again, same situation, right? There wasn't an interview. It was, this is what I need to get done. You're the right person for the job. This is what my expectations are. Can we work this out? Right. And that was it. Right. And so now I worked at St. Augustine's for 2 years before I came over here.
Man, so a couple of things. Networking has been one of the biggest things we talked about. Networking is so important. I talk about it all the weekend. Whenever time I do a week of networking on my social media platforms, it's probably the most fulfilling one because it makes so much sense that we need people in anything that you want to do to get to where you want to go. And you just gave some awesome stories. I mean, God plays a little bit into it, but also Alpha did a big, huge piece as well. But you don't, I try to, the more people you connect with, the more lanes and swim lanes you can create for yourself. We all have stories. I have plenty of stories that got me in just, being in football, or also being from my university or being from Fayetteville, wherever you're from, those connections resonate to people. And that's what the human heart does. We want to innately just help people out. But those connections you have with people that built over time then put you in a place to where, you're not going to be going to St. Aug's gave you an opportunity to learn how to be who you need to be today. It was that first step that may be hard and maybe some grinding work, but that fulfillment is what I see now that you're taking on at NC State. And now what? You're mastering it. You're doing it with, you still got some bumps in the road, but you're doing it as a leader. You're doing it with purpose. You're doing it in a space that, we definitely want to showcase today how people need you, but you also need them to be better and a good teacher, professor, director, leader at NC State. So this is awesome, man, just to capture all this right now. I like to tie everybody together like I'm a doctor, but I am just Mark. But no, man, I definitely appreciate you. I know we've been going for a while. I did want to ask one good last question. 2 questions. I asked these 2 questions.
Okay.
And I'll tie them together. So you imagine yourself, your older yourself now talking to your younger self. How would you tell that person to create success? Going back to young Kanton, how would you talk to Kanton about what success is, what it means, and how to chart that path for themselves?
A couple of things that come to mind are, the first is you have to take risks, right? People like to say nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? You got to be willing to take risks. I, in hindsight, was probably too comfortable and too risk averse to take risks required to really grow my career in the corporate side, right? So if I have one regret, is that I didn't take enough risks and try things that maybe were a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. Instead of taking incremental steps, take larger steps. Larger the risk, the larger the reward, right? And so I would tell people, don't be afraid to take risks, but take them when you're younger, right? Like, I'm not going to take a lot of risks at 51, right? But at 31, right, or 21 certainly, but 31, definitely take risks in terms of trying a job that maybe you wouldn't have thought you would, or moving to a different part of the country, or whatever, right? Take
Right.
those risks, learn from them, and then use them to build yourself up in different ways. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is you have to constantly be learning. If you're not
Mhm.
growing, then you're getting stale, right? If you're sitting
Right.
sedentary, right? You got to continue to learn and grow and amass more information and knowledge and be able to talk about things competently and confidently,
Mhm.
because that's what attracts other people to you as a mentor or a sponsor or a collaborator. They want to be around people that they see are moving and shaking, right? So you got to always be looking like you're in motion. You can't let this inertia get to you, right? So learning something, reading something, growing in some meaningful, tangible,
Mhm.
intellectual way. And then the last thing is, as someone who's kind of always been on the engineering technology side of the house, I wish I would have spent more time learning about languages and people, because I think it would have
Mm.
diversified the career opportunities that I had available to me, right? So, like, I have a bunch of students now who are minoring in psychology or minoring in Spanish. While I had a minor in history and I think it was useful to me, I think something
Right.
like minoring in, understanding how to talk to people and deal with people in an intellectual engagement, with an intellectual or communicative basis, I think is an important skill to have. We can all be better communicators. I think you get that from being a communication or psychology major, and then understanding language, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent. People like to predominate the usage of the English language, the usage of the English language in uh, this country, and I get that. But when you leave this country,
Right.
it's rough, right? And it impacts everything, right? Like, I think about you. You mentioned earlier how you see me posting all the time about my travels. But even if you look at my travels, all the places I've been in Africa, it's been almost all the Anglo countries, right? The only
Right.
country that I've been to in Africa where English isn't the predominant language is Dakar. I went to Dakar last spring to the NBA
Mm.
Africa League tournament, right? And it's a French speaking country, and I felt lost because I don't speak French or um, what's the other Wolof. Yeah, I don't speak French or
Mhm.
Wolof, which are predominant languages, right? So it's hard, right? And so I wish I would have
Right.
learned another language, because that's another form of communication and opens up a different world for you. So those are the three things. Don't be afraid to take risks and invest in yourself and learn something new.
Man, that's incredible, man. Like your younger self would actually be incredible. But guess what? Things come as they come. But for those folks out here who are watching and learning today, take these opportunities. This is good nuggets for you. I'm glad we're able to put this out here into the world for people to understand that you still got an opportunity to change your life and change what matters. So thank you, Kanton. I appreciate this podcast. Tell the people how they can contact you. Well, we already know, but tell them how they can reach out to you if they want to learn more, but they want to pick your brain some more, maybe see what you can offer them one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just mention that you saw me on the podcast, right? So it's Kanton Reynolds on LinkedIn, ain't but one. You can also reach me here at NC State. So it's ise.ncsu.edu is our department website, and then you go into people, you'll find Kanton Reynolds, or my email is kreynolds at ncsu.edu.
Good, 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 good. Man, we could actually go longer. I got more questions. I'm thinking about saying, nah, let me save your time. I told you 30, 45 minutes, but I definitely, again, I appreciate you and for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your information here. This was good. This was good conversation, good stories, good nuggets. And for those folks out here who want to continue to watch things like this, information that we share weekly all the time, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, uh, what else we got? LinkedIn at careertransformationacademy.com. I'm sorry, at Career Transformation Academy. You can go on TikTok. We're the Blueprint by CTA. Again, that's the Blueprint by CTA on TikTok. And if you want to learn more on how to land your dream job, how to get a career, a fulfilling career to change your financial freedom, some family empowerment, and upgrade your lifestyle, you can find out more on www.careertransformationacademy.com. We are there to give you skills, coaching skills, interviewing skills, resume skills, and everything that you need to know about getting your next career. We're here to teach you that. So book a session right now. Again, Kanton, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you. This was an awesome cast. And until next time, let's say goodbye to the people.
No, thank you. And as my man Russell Simmons has said, God bless and good night.
That was a good way to end it, man. I appreciate you again. Peace.